In this movie, Pietro's life goes from simple co-parenting to drug smuggling, all in the name of saving his kids. What starts as a regular custody battle quickly turns into a wild ride involving shady deals, mysterious kidnappings, and a whole lot of confusion. At the beginning of the movie, we see Pietro, his wife Alina, and their two children, Giovanni and Bianca, swimming at the beach. Then, the scene shifts, and we learn that Pietro and Alina are divorced. They are now discussing who will get custody of the children. Alina's lawyer accuses Pietro of having a gambling addiction, saying that if Alina had bad habits, they wouldn't be able to have children. Pietro's lawyer responds by saying that Alina is a writer, but also a drug addict. Pietro explains that Alina had a car accident a long time ago and was prescribed medicine, but she became addicted to it. After this, we see Alina and Pietro talking. Next, we find out that Alina has to go to America for a meeting, so she wants Pietro to look after the kids. Pietro agrees and takes the children with him. First, they go to the beach, where the three of them catch sea urchins. There, Pietro's old friend Nicola is also present, but Pietro doesn't talk to him much because Nicola was involved in illegal activities. The children want to go on Nicola's boat, and Pietro allows it. Nicola then invites Pietro and the kids to a party on the boat, but Pietro refuses and takes the children home. When they get home, Pietro meets a man named Sato, who has come to collect money Pietro lost in gambling. Sato tells Pietro he owes him €1,000,000 and suggests Pietro sell the house he's working on to pay off the debt. However, Pietro says the house is his dream project and promises to pay the money by Christmas after finishing and selling the house. Sato leaves after that. Later that night, Pietro gives the kids a bath, puts them to bed, and sits down to watch a match on TV. Giovanni, one of the children, comes to Pietro, saying there's a monster in his room. Pietro checks and finds it's just a tree branch. He puts Giovanni back to bed and returns to watch the match, drinking and smoking. After some time, Pietro goes to check on the children again, but they're not in bed. He searches the house and the nearby area but can't find them. Desperate, he calls Alina and tells her everything. Alina takes the first flight and arrives, furious, yelling at Pietro for not being able to take care of the children properly. Pietro and Alina go inside, and then Pietro receives a phone call. The person on the call says they want €500,000 by the next morning if Pietro wants to see his children again. Pietro tells Alina that there was no number or caller ID on the call. Worried, Pietro goes outside and tries calling Sato, thinking he might be behind this, but the call goes to voicemail. Alina suggests they go to the police, but Pietro says the kidnappers warned that if they involve the police, they will never see their children again. So, they have to arrange the money themselves. Alina suggests asking Nicola for help, but Pietro is hesitant. However, for the sake of the children, he goes to Nicola. Pietro doesn't tell Nicola about the kidnapping but says he needs money for the kids. Nicola agrees to help, but only if Pietro does something for him. Nicola tells Pietro to take his boat to a harbor, stop at a restaurant, eat, drink, and rest there without talking to anyone. Afterward, some people will approach him, give him instructions, and load something onto his boat, which is actually drugs. Pietro will then need to bring the boat back without raising any suspicion, as he's a family man, and no one would suspect him. Nicola takes Pietro's phone and asks him to turn off the boat's GPS. Pietro leaves, and later explains the plan to Alina. Alina is against it, but Pietro feels he has no choice because of their children. It's important to note that the kids went missing at 1 a.m., and now it's evening when Pietro is preparing to leave for the harbor. Around 10 p.m., Pietro says goodbye to Alina and heads to the harbor with Nicola's boat. As he travels, he remembers the happy times they had as a family. At night, Pietro arrives at the harbor, books a table at a restaurant, and sits there waiting for someone to approach him. Hours pass, but no one comes. Pietro borrows a phone from someone and tries calling Nicola, but there's no answer. He also calls Alina, but she doesn't pick up either. Frustrated, Pietro leaves a voice message for Nicola, asking why no one came to contact him as planned. Pietro continues to wait at the table until the restaurant empties, leaving him alone. Finally, he asks for the bill, and when the waiter hands it to him, Pietro sees a note written on the back. The note simply says, "Go home." Pietro starts the boat and heads home, but suddenly, some people arrive and begin attacking his boat. They get on board, point a gun at him, and demand Nicola's payment. Just as they are about to kill Pietro, Nicola makes the payment at the last minute, and they hand Pietro a bag full of drugs before leaving. Pietro starts heading home with the bag, but on the way, his boat breaks down, and he injures his hand. Now, he's stuck in the middle of the sea at night. Feeling desperate, Pietro turns on the radio and calls the Coast Guard for help. The Coast Guard arrives after a short time. Pietro quickly hides the bag of drugs before they check his boat. It's a tense moment, and it feels like Pietro might get caught, but he doesn't. They check his passport, and while one of the guards examines the boat, he tells Pietro that his boat won't make it to his destination because the engine failed due to a leaking fuel pipe. They offer to tow him to a nearby coast, and with no other option, Pietro agrees. Once they reach the nearby coast, Pietro grabs the bag and boards a bus. While on the bus, he is visibly nervous. He tries calling Elena from someone else's phone, but she doesn't answer. As soon as he arrives in Nicola's city, Pietro starts running. He knows time is running out, and he heads straight to Nicola. When Pietro meets Nicola, he demands that Nicola take the bag of drugs and give him the money. But Nicola laughs, thinking Pietro is joking. Pietro, getting frustrated, shouts at Nicola to give him the money. Nicola pulls out a gun, pointing it at Pietro, accusing him of being rude. Pietro tries to calm him down, but Nicola fires a shot at the floor. This enrages Pietro, and the two get into a big fight, leaving both of them injured. Despite the fight, Nicola eventually gives Pietro the money. Pietro grabs the cash and rushes to Elena's house. From the start, it seemed like either Sato or Nicola was responsible for kidnapping the children. Sato wanted money from Pietro, and Nicola had forced Pietro to do the job, so it was easy to suspect one of them. When Pietro reaches Elena's house, he's in for a shock. He sees both of his children, Giovanni and Bianca, right there. They tell him that they were with Elena the whole time. Elena appears, and Pietro, in disbelief, tries to talk to her. Pietro tells Elena the whole story about the kidnapping, but she looks confused and says she has no idea what he's talking about. She insists the kids were with him the whole time. Pietro, frustrated, tells her that he smuggled drugs to save the children and that he has brought 500,000 euros as ransom money. Elena still doesn't understand what he's talking about. Pietro, growing angry, starts yelling at her. Elena, upset, asks him to leave, and so Pietro leaves. At this point, we learn that Pietro is actually mentally unstable, which is why he and Elena divorced. Everything Pietro experienced was just his imagination. As he drives away, Elena sends him a recording. In it, she tells him that she wants full custody of the kids because he is mentally ill and dangerous. She threatens that if he doesn't agree, she'll use the recording to prove it and send him to jail. After hearing the recording, Pietro rushes to Elena's house, but she isn't there. He immediately goes to the horse riding classes and finds Jvala and Bianca. He asks them if they remember being with him the previous day. Jvala says she remembers a little, but Bianca doesn't recall anything, which makes Pietro realize that Elena had set this all up to get custody of the children. He now believes that he is fine, and that neither Sato nor Nicola did anything. Then, Elena arrives and admits she did all of this because Pietro gave her no other choice. She tells him she's determined to get custody of the children, even if it means leaving for America with them. Pietro, feeling helpless, leaves because there's nothing more he can do. Later, Pietro goes back to his home. After taking a shower, he notices a pill wrapper in the toilet and remembers that the flush button has to be pressed twice. This memory triggers something in him, and he immediately heads to Elena's house to search for the pills. Pietro finds the pill he was looking for and immediately heads to the airport. At the same time, the movie reveals how Elena had drugged the children with that pill when she saw them alone. This made them forget the time they had spent with Pietro. After drugging them, Elena took the kids back to her house. Pietro calls Elena and tells her not to leave because he is now ready to sign the custody papers. He rushes to the airport and confronts Elena. He tells her that he knows what she did to the children and that he spoke to a doctor who explained that traces of the drug would remain in their hair. Pietro says he won't let her take the children because of what she did. They could have died because of it. He tells her that now, because of her actions, she will be left alone. Realizing she has been caught, and there's nothing more she can do, Elena says goodbye to the children. Pietro takes the kids and leaves. When they get home, Pietro calls Sato and tells him to come collect the money he owes. After that, Pietro watches his children, Giovanni and Bianca, playing in front of him. He feels a deep sense of happiness because he has finally won custody of his kids. And with that, the movie comes to an end. And that's how Pietro went from being a stressed-out dad to a full-time detective, drug expert, and, apparently, a professional boat smuggler. Who knew parenting came with so many side quests? But in the end, he got what he wanted, His kids, his sanity, well, sort of, and a very suspicious pill collection. If you enjoyed this wild ride of parenting, plot twists, and boat chases, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for more movie madness. Because, let's be honest, you're probably curious about what happens next. Does Pietro finally fix that boat?